There were a couple of decades when I did There were a couple of decades when I didn't give food much thought. I got hungry, I ate. This was contributed by the fact that everything cooked in East Grand Forks, Minnesota includes a can of mushroom soup, and it's baked at 350 for an hour. The high point of my gastronomic childhood was my first restaurant meal. This occurred when I was 12 years old, and I ordered pickled herring for my appetizer, which came accented with garlic toast. Before I picked it up, my father said, "You don't have to eat that. It's spicy." I loved it. I bought garlic powder with my babysitting money. I believe that the food in college was also forgettable because I don't remember a single meal for those 4 years. It wasn't really that I'd risen above food, it's just that it had really not crossed my mind until the summer after graduation. I rented half a basement room in Hyattsville and began a very long series of dinners that consisted of tomato soup and grilled cheese sandwiches. However, sometime during the third month, the spirit spoke to me and she said, "You'd better learn to cook something you enjoy eating." I wasn't starting from zero. I knew how to make several kinds of mushroom soup hot dishes, and I had a bachelor's degree in chemistry. Physics majors dismissed us as cookbook chemists. I made a leap of logic and decided that I could probably read a cookbook and make better food. Alas, when I moved to Hopkins in September, I had nowhere to cook. While in college, I had run afoul of getting my money's worth out of my board contract and gotten fat. I had the opposite problem in Baltimore. I had to pay a la carte in the hospital cafeteria, and it was very difficult to let George Washington out of my fingers every evening. The cheapest thing on their menu was the Spanish omelet. It was only $1.29, but it was mostly Bisquick and salsa. After the first 2 weeks, I had enough. Now, Hopkins did have an eating club where you could go in and get lunch or dinner for $5 each. The problem was, it was just for guys. Women were only allowed as guests. The food was greasy, and the chairs and tables were all sticky. And the conversation was actually pretty lewd. But I liked the idea of cooking and eating with a group. So with 5 other women, we started an eating co-op. We'd each cook dinner on Rita's hot plate one night a week. This was somewhat successful, but it turned out that most of us had a one-dish repertoire. For Christmas, the other 5 chipped in, gave me a cookbook, and said they decided that I should do all the cooking. Each would pay me $25 a week and help with prep if I would plan and shop. This seemed like so much better a deal than like getting up at 4 o'clock to draw blood for 3 hours. Would I? You bet. With all that money, I left my $80 dorm room for a $110 apartment, shared, with a refrigerator and a 4-burner stove with an oven. I developed an extremely close relationship with Nikki Ciccioni, who had the produce stand closest to the front door of Eastern Market. Every evening on my way home from class, he'd give me a couple bags of rejects for not much money. I discovered that using olive oil and garlic, you can turn almost anything into pasta sauce or soup. I planned, everybody showed up and prepped, while somebody made peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for people to take for lunch the next day. Then we got company. My roommate's sister and her boyfriend were coming to Baltimore to stay with us. This was an unusual couple. They were socialists. They were living in sin. which her mother called to tell us, and they were vegetarians. But hey, I am a tolerant, hospitable person and a geek. My first move was a literature search. And I have to say, in 1973, the answer was not much literature. I did, however, score a used copy of Diet for a Small Planet. I was agog. I drank in the 100 or so pages of explanation that began the book. It seemed clear. I'd grown up near feedlots. Bad for the land, worse for the river, and really bad for the cows. LePay's exposition on the lowered environmental costs of vegetarianism spoke to me. Even before that, the financial benefits of vegetarianism were quite obvious. About half my grocery budget was chicken. Dried beans were much cheaper. As an aside, in 1973, I believe tofu had not been invented. The only downside of more LePay's vegetarianism was the recipes. Her belief that one must eat the entire range of amino acids in each bite led to some unusual combinations. I tried the dilled chickpea bulgur yogurt balls, the soy and lima bean casserole, which was only slightly redeemed by ketchup, and the cabbage wheatberry muffins. I felt like a chemist combining unlikely elements to make things that, as it turned out, almost all wound up being baked for an hour at 350 and felt a lot like tuna fish hot dish. This was the food I had left North Dakota to avoid. My team of eaters reviewed every offering, and they said every single dish would be improved by adding a ham hock. Even the muffins. I dropped back to modifying recipes they liked, but since we were now, sort of essentially vegetarian, they each only had to pay me $18 a week. Fast forward a few years, I got an internship in California and reconnected with some college friends. They were vegetarian, so I kind of steeled myself and was shocked to find out that the food they served was not weird. Their secret, Laurel's Kitchen. Recipes for things a person could enjoy eating. I've been happily mostly vegetarian since buying my copy in 1977. Before that, I was vegetarian, but not so happy. I live a cosmopolitan life, and I had heard about vegans, who I actually thought of as people even weirder than me. But I'd never met one, as far as I know, until Margaret Fisher showed up at the women's retreat. She seemed fine. But then at BYM 2014, I neglected to sign up for a workshop, and I was kind of loitering in a stairwell when she walked up to me and said she needed me to come with her and support her while she did her workshop. Sure, so I did. The starter kit she passed out made a convincing case that animals kept for dairy and eggs suffer longer than those raised to be eaten later. So I became a convinced vegan. Not much of a step for a lactose-intolerant vegetarian who can't or doesn't bake. Except that I was vegetarian for the health of the earth and myself and other people who need enough to eat. Moving the lessening of sufferings for other animals into my heart has unfortunately made it much harder to make exceptions. And I often feel pulled to evangelize.